welcome to another episode of Tesseract Talks, the place where we put the spotlight on tech trends, startups, and VCs. My name is Marko. I'm the CEO and founder at Tesseract Analytics, and it is my pleasure today to have Ivan Burazin as our guest. He's a CEO and co-founder at Daytona, a platform that provides instant, scalable, and secure development environments. Ivan, welcome. How are you?
I'm pretty good. Thanks for having me.
Great. So before we start, I have to tell the audience that although we've never met in person, we both worked at Infobip in the past at different times though. So just wanted to give a shout out to Infobip for connecting us indirectly.
Absolutely.
There are a few things I wanted to discuss today. So why don't we first start by you telling us about your career background and journey from Procedo, Shift Conference, Code Anywhere, Infobip, and now Daytona. How did it happen?
Sure. I mean, it depends on how far you want to go back. I always tell the story of my first job was selling popcorn on the boardwalk. Like that's sort of where we started, and then shoveling snow and all that. But from like the from a tech perspective, tech career perspective. So my very first job out of university was a system administrator, quickly became like the IT manager in that sort of team, thinking about my progression and or leaving, and basically offered my boss at that time, like maybe we spin out this IT department to service your companies. There was multiple companies there, and also offer this to the market. And we do it sort of like as co-founders or co-owners of the new company. There was a very low probability he would have said yes in my mind, but it ended up being a yes. And so my very first sort of like entrepreneurial experience was creating this IT services company. So you can imagine like we would stack servers and routers and all these things. And we learned a lot. So you had like the messy part where you'd actually like go under tables and like pull off cables across, ceilings and whatnot. But for the vast majority of stuff, it was being in data rooms and server rooms with all these servers and installing them and configuring that. Working on that for a few years, but I did sort of figure out that like the way the world is going, like gross profit margins were compressing. The internet and the way of direct selling to consumers was prevailing. So like Microsoft and Dell would sell directly to consumers, and then you would have much less amount of profit margins there. So it's basically full on services, which was not something I saw that had a possibility for like a global expansion of sorts. Luckily, one of our customers was a bank, and the CIO of the bank was or is my co-founder now at Daytona, and I co-founded a product before that. And so he basically showed me, while I had this company and he was a CIO, the idea of a browser-based coding platform, which was very new. This is like in 2009. We were the very first people in the world to make, or he was, not I was, to make something like this. And then when we saw that, it was like, this is where the world is going. We should do this. And so it took a while. Technology had to get where it needed to be so we could build this, but we ended up selling that services businesses and focusing full time on the company, which is now called Code Anywhere, or was called Code Anywhere. Unlucky for us, one of the very few things that went to the browser en masse was coding environments. So like everything else went, but that did not go. So there was some success with that product, but it was not the breakout success that we would have expected. There was like millions of people signed up to it, but it was never a VC backed like IPO type company. It was this sort of little internet business that did its thing. On the tailwind of that, I did start organizing developer conferences just to give back to the community. At that time, living in Croatia, there was nothing remotely close to that, but there were like conferences around the world that we went to, like TechCrunch Disrupt and these other ones. And so started doing that, ended up being actually quite successful in that. And so when we sort of like wound down Code Anywhere, I did that actually full time and grew that into an actual business. No venture investors, nothing. So it's bootstrap. We did 3 conferences a year and it did really, really well. And so that is where Infobip comes in. Me and you worked at. So Infobip, for those people that don't know, is it's a private company, but they do multiple $billion in revenue a year. And they are a cloud platform as a service provider. Basically, there's an API so that you can basically connect, send SMS, email, whatever, communication with your end user. So you can think about when an Uber driver calls you, that goes through Infobip. This is more for our listeners than for you, obviously.
Of course.
And they came in and acquired the conference business, and the conference still exists. There's now like 5,000 people come to the conference. It's in multiple countries. It's expanding even more, and it's become their flagship conference. Outside of that, I also ran built out their entire developer experience department, which includes like DevRel and startups, conferences, and content and all these things. And I left that after 2 years and 9 months to start Daytona. We can talk about that a bit later, but basically my entire career has been servers, developers, dev environments, which are also servers, infrastructure. The conference is maybe a bit out there, but the buyer persona is still a developer. So infrastructure for developers has basically been something that has been in my career, if we can say it like that.
Amazing journey so far. Now, let's dig a bit deeper into the topic. What do you see as the biggest challenge for software developers today? Or as the saying goes, what keeps them up at night?
So I don't know how much it keeps them up at night, actually, but what I've never seen in my life, I've never seen time pass over young generations. So let me try to articulate this better. So if you were an engineer, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, you could have been top of your game. But if you did not adapt to modern technological infrastructure and programming languages, you cannot compete with the younger generations just because you were great at what you were, but you did not continue to learn the new technologies, and basically just time passed you by, right? And this, you can see this today with developers that are from like a few generations ago. And most of these people, by the time that happens, they're basically at the outer end of their career curve, right? What I have never seen in my entire life is 28-year-olds, 29-year-olds, 30-year-olds that when you show them what they can do by being augmented, not replaced, but augmented at this point with AI, and they're not using that for whatever reason, you see in their eyes that they don't understand what is happening. I've seen this myself. And you cannot work with these people. Like, to be clear, in this day and age, if you want to compete with the best, you have to use all the best tools to compete with them, right? And if that is your modus operandi, then everyone on your team has to run at that pace. And so if you're not doing that, you're not running at that pace. And so what's interesting is that right now, and again, I don't know how many people are aware or not aware of, if you are not embracing these tools, there's so many reasons why they will not. And they're not they will not solve all the problems in the world, but they definitely will make things faster for you. And so if you're not embracing this, just time will pass you by. And I don't know what happens to all these people that are like 33 in a few years and can't be employed for the tasks that they were taught to do. So I think that is probably one of the biggest things. I don't want to go too dark with this podcast, but like that.
So adaptability, and I guess openness to these new tech changes.
Absolutely. And historically, the changes would happen over longer periods of time. And now they're just happening so much faster. And so that is why it's a bigger problem than it's ever been historically.
Okay. And can you tell us a bit more about your current company, Daytona? Why did you start it, and what kind of value are you bringing to the story?
Sure. We started for different reasons. It's a year and a half old, a bit more. So we started with automating development environments for large enterprises. So what that means is if you were to go to work at one of the big tech companies, so think like a Google, Meta, whatever, when you come to work there, you click a button, and as a developer, you just start working. It's all automated. It's all very simple. When you're not working at those companies, but you're working at a large company of equal size, so think, aviation, transport, military, defense, banking, whatever, to get up and running, the time it takes you as a developer can go anywhere from hours to literally days to weeks for you to say, oh, I want to work on this code. That's how much time it takes you to get up and running. And so that is just wasted time. That's useless. And it might not even be that important if you just do it once, but you as a developer probably working on different projects throughout the day, the week, the year, the month. And so for every one of these, you have to do that again. The reason is that dev environments, or the environment for you to code, have become so complex in these large companies that it is a large overhead for you to get them set it up. And so this is very different from what you do in vibe coding right now and how simple that is. We can talk about that. But basically for these large enterprises, it's very complex for the engineers in them. And so what we wanted to do was level the playing field. It's like, you're not Google, but you're the size of Google and you have the same problems as Google. Can we give you this solution, right? That's how we started. And it was going very, very well. We've raised 2 rounds of funding in a year and a half, great customers onboarded, more coming in. But the interesting thing is that what we found is everything that we've learned historically, and part of it is what we built in Daytona, but part of it is what we learned through the former companies, is that in this world of AI and AI agents specifically, that AI agents have not only a similar problem to humans in the sense of automating dev environments, but they have different needs and specific needs that humans do not, that make our solutions or variations of our solutions even more valuable. Plus, the potential market of serving AI agents versus humans is just extraordinary. It eclipses, even if you are don't believe the hype as it's going and you believe the growth will be just linear, as in any technology, it will still be orders of magnitude larger than serving all human developers. And so I sort of gave you sort of a wide example. I'm happy to dive deeper in some of the things, but I just gave you sort of like context of what we're doing and why we're doing it.
Okay. And I mean, from my perspective, yeah, it does sound like a challenge the developers or companies are facing now. So what's now next for Daytona? What are your current plans, and how can maybe people test your products if they're interested in?
Sure. Apologies. I might have to take a step back and sort of just say how it works and why it works. So the definition, the easiest way to start off is what is an AI agent? There's different definitions, but just let's take a ChatGPT or a Claude, which is I'm sure most of the people listening to this have used. And so that is an AI agent. It is basically an interface that works with a human and connects to an LLM, a large language model in the back end. And so you ask it a question through the interface, which is the agent. The agent then goes to the model and says, hey, here's my question. What is my answer? And so let's take, you ask it, what is the capital city, whatever, of the United States of America? It'll ask the model, or it'll Google search, whatever it will do. The model will Google search, and then it'll say Washington, D.C., right? And that's great, and that works fine. But let's take an example of when it needs to go outside of the model itself and something what we call tool calling. So basically an agent, if you give ChatGPT, give me the difference between these two numbers. So whatever two numbers, pick any, like 4 and 7. What is the diff in percentage? It will write out, as we would in high school on a piece of paper, the entire mathematical formula to that solution, right? And so that is not the best way to do it. Why? Well, one, because it actually gets it wrong sometimes. Believe it or not, the model will get it wrong, as we would probably and as we did in high school, right? It gets it wrong. Two, it takes up time because you have to write out the whole formula. And depending how complex the question you ask, that's how long the formula takes. And three, it uses up some of the tokens or context windows. That's the least, but basically those are the three things, right? And so how would you solve that if I asked you, Marco? Well, Marco would, open up his calculator app and type in the numbers and give you the result. And so why does not an agent not do that thing as well? And well, there's a very new sort of movement happening, which agents can call tools. And so in this example, an agent, or let's take ChatGPT, they had it for a while, they removed it. We'll see if they bring it back, where the agent won't ask the model, it will just open up a calculator app and just give you the result. Because there's no reason. It's fast, it's correct, it doesn't use a context window, right? And that's the most primitive way of thinking about tools. We fall into a tool category, I'll get into that. And so that's the most primitive. And so what is the second one? I don't know how many people have seen like Operator or companies like Browser Use or Browser Base. So what is that? That is basically enabling your agent. So think about ChatGPT in this context again. Well, can you book me? It's the worst probable example, but can you book me find me the 5 best restaurants in New York for Chinese food that are open that day and in a radius of whatever. And then how does it figure that out? So the easiest way is that it actually opens, a browser, like types in the search, finds them, filters them out, and then gives you the result. And you say, okay, great. Now book it for me at 8 p.m. for 2 people because I have a date or whatever. And so it'll do it again through a browser as a human would. And that's all great, but that's still limiting to what an agent can actually do. Because if you think about it, you're probably not working on a Chromebook, which is equivalent to having a browser. You're probably working on like a Mac or Windows or Linux, whatever, because there's more things that you can actually run on your machine that you could not do if you did not have a machine. And so what Daytona offers is that full-on machine as a tool for the agent. So the simplest example I can give you is if you tell your agent, can you write me this code and like create me this beautiful website for like a flower shop, whatever. ChatGPT can write it for you, but it can't actually run it to show you what it looks like. It'll just run it for you. It'll just write out the code and say, here you go, Marco, take this code and now go to your laptop and do X, Y, Z. Versus if it has something like a Daytona, it will actually spin up a Daytona where a server, you can think of it as a laptop for the agent. It'll spin it up and then it'll inject the code inside of it, run it, and send you the link, the URL, and you'll be able to preview it. It's like, oh wow, this is great, and you can send it to your like business partner or your personal partner. Does this look good? And they'll say it doesn't or it does, whatever. So what Daytona does in the essence is basically what a Mac is or a Windows PC is to a human. That is what we give to an agent. And obviously there's way more complexities because a human can only work on one laptop really. An agent can work on like 36,000 in parallel at the same time to try to do these things. And there's so much nuances around that, but basically that is what Daytona does. And we serve agents in that manner, specifically for, laptops for coding would be the equivalent of that.
Okay. And I guess for those, I'm sure there will be developers that are listening to this that wanted to test out, or should they just reach out to you or go to the website?
Sure, absolutely. So Daytona.io is the website. It is still in private beta. There's a wait list, but we are letting people in fairly fast. So you can go to the website, Daytona.io. There's a button there. You put your name and the email in the wait list, and we'll let you in.
Awesome. Great. Well, thank you, Ivan, for sharing your story and valuable insights. Perhaps we'll talk more in depth in another episode, but for now, for today, that was it. So thank you, and wishing you and our audience all the best until next episode. Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Bye.